Yo, what's up everybody? Isaac here coming to you with another New World video. So recently I made a tanking guide. It's a very well-rounded tanking guide, very well-rounded tanking build that can work in all dungeons. And that was geared towards a heavy tank. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I do change things up depending on the dungeon, depending on the run. And this one's going to be geared more towards an advanced tanking guide. So we are light tanking the Lazarus. It is a nature mutation, but let's jump right into it. So first things first, we are going to show you the attributes we were using for this run. Definitely a few different attributes you can use, but especially for Lazarus, we make sure we pop a food that is full strength and or dexterity. We don't want any constitution. Although we are going to put some constitution on, we want the opportunity to go down to 5 con for the very last boss. So we pop our food, and then definitely a few different ways you can run this, but for this run I went to 150 con, went for the 200 plus strength, 150 plus dex, and we called it good. So definitely prefer if I can even get down to 100 con, maybe even 50 con, but you need to make sure you have a really strong team for that. So this run I did, it was just a pug group, made a group in the group finder, and well, this is an extremely important part about light tanking, advanced tanking. You need to make sure you do a good job of team building. So in order to light tank, it's not all about you doing everything. You need a very well-rounded, well-optimized team. So when I made this group, I said, well, light tank, leadership, and then I start letting them know what I'm looking for. DPS 1, skewer plus infib male strum. So we need 1 DPS that's going to apply tons of weaken with a skewer perk on their spear, and a bunch of weaken with enfeebling maelstrom on their axe. And obviously the axe is also for the gravity well, and including with the maelstrom, lots of crowd control with a DPS like that. So that 1 DPS can apply tons of weaken and have some really good crowd control while still putting out some really strong DPS. And he's also going to apply some good rend with his perforate. So that's the first DPS we want to make sure we have. The second DPS we want to make sure we have is, well, we're looking for a great sword hammer. And we are going to make sure that is a hammer that is running the trenchant strikes build, where you got 300 strength and they're running heavy attack builds. And he's also going to have his hammer in the back bar for 2 knockdowns plus armor breaker, because the armor breaker is going to apply a 30% rend, which is huge. And hopefully he has sundering shockwave as well, so he can apply another 14% rend there. So those are the 2 main DPS that we are looking for. And then the third DPS, it can be a little bit of a toss-up. So if you have a really well organized group, something like a bleed rapier ice gauntlet build is going to be awesome, but you do lose out on a little bit of crowd control. So since it is a random group, it is better if you have an extra DPS that has some crowd control. So if the third DPS is anything from another great sword hammer, a great sword great axe, anything like that is going to be wonderful. So then the next thing we need is we need a healer that has refreshing plus refreshing move on his light staff. So just a normal run where you're just trying to get gold, a healer doesn't necessarily need to have a bunch of refreshing on their gear, because just refreshing move is enough to keep the heals going. But if you're trying to do an advanced run, you may be trying to make a run for a leaderboard point. Well, you're going to want a healer that has refreshing plus refreshing move. That way, they can also be making use of their Void Gauntlet in the back bar, helping your team add extra empower, helping your team by doing a little bit of extra DPS. So when he has his Void Gauntlet out, he can't make use of this refreshing move. So he needs to have some refreshing on his gear in order to make up for that, so he can keep the Sacred Grounds up pretty much at all times. Really important if you are doing more of an advanced run. So it's kind of the main thing that we did when we were team building. And then we're checking all of our DPS and we're messaging them back and forth, just letting them know that it is a serious run, that we are only gonna go if we get a full group of people that are well optimized. So 50 con is kind of the max you want on the DPS. Preferably they're 5 con, but I think I had 1 or 2 of them that ended up being 50 con. So it's what it is. We still found a good group, but then we go ahead and we make the group. And so that's honestly the number one most important part about advanced tanking is you got to have a group that can help you out. You can't do it all on your own. It's all about players that know the run, because there's certain pulls where if you pull the wrong mob at the wrong time, well, you're in trouble. So really important that you have players that understand the mechanics that go on within a run that you're trying to get through nice and fast. So there you have it. Number one most important thing with advanced tanking, have a really strong team. So next thing, let's talk about the gear. So this is the gear that I did use, and I actually do switch out gear. So I make use of 3 different sets within this dungeon. So it's another thing is, oftentimes if you are trying to do more of an advanced style run, you're going to want to make sure you're optimized for different situations. Different bosses, sometimes you need different gear. So that's in part why we are using 3 different sets. And we are also going to be changing out 1 amulet for the very last boss, but the rest of this gear will stay on for the very last boss. So I do not have the absolute perfect gear. In a perfect world, I would have all of the weapon perks for my sword and shield. Number 1 is having fortified shield rush. I don't have it, but that would be ideal to have it on your gear. But nonetheless, we make do without it. So definitely can be more optimized than this build is, but this is good enough. So to start off, if you're going to be running sword and shield, which I am, some light tanks, they prefer to run hammer and hatchet, or else hammer and spear for extra knockdowns. But for me personally, not running sword and shield, losing that leadership boost that you give to your team, it's kind of a big loss to take in my opinion. So we are going full light sword and shield, so that means we have to have 5 pieces of light gear. We have 4 pieces of this Sunlord set. It's not perfect BIS for light tanking, but it does work fairly well. So we have Shuriken Fort, it's going to give us a little bit of extra survivability. Every time we dodge an attack, we're going to get a little extra boost of some fortification from 4 different pieces. And then we have Refreshing Evasion. It's going to help our cooldowns come back faster. Straight up refreshing would be better, but this is not bad, not terrible at all. So 4 pieces of that, and then the 5th piece we have does have refreshing on it, which is very nice. Ancient Ward. So in a perfect world, we would have Ancient Ward, refreshing, and fortified shield rust. And on our chest piece, maybe we would have sturdy energy, ward plus refreshing. That would be a BIS chest piece. But anyways, so even though this isn't BISed out, it's still very viable for this run. So on our shield, this is kind of kind of abyss type of shield in my opinion. We got Bane, which is the important thing. And then we have Vicious, which is going to help us do extra damage, of course. And then we do have Accelerated Resolve. So after triggering Defender's Resolve, we're going to increase movement speed by 33% and incoming healing by 13% for 6 seconds. So very nice to have these extra benefits of your weapon perks when you can have them. So very good shield for doing extra damage, plus we get one weapon perk. So very, very nice. This one you do get from the Lazarus itself. These two, the Bane and the Accelerated Resolve, they are guaranteed perks on the shield, but then you get a third, and you're just going to have to get lucky enough to get a good third perk, which shouldn't be too hard if you do run Lazarus a lot. So, and on our amulet, we're trying to get everything with dexterity and strength. That way we do have the option to go down to 5 con when needed. So our amulet, we got to have health and nature protection. It is a nature dungeon, so nature mutation. Our ring, this is kind of my go-to, Simon's Hack Silver Ring. It's got slash damage, so we can do extra damage with our sword and shield. Hardy, so we have extra stamina. Very nice as a tank. You know, give us a little extra stamina for blocking, a little extra stamina for dodging. Not as important, since we are going to 150 dex, which gives us dodge costs 10 less stamina. So even without this ring, we can get 3 full dodges before we run out of stamina, which is very important. So we don't actually need this ring. The other ring that would be very viable to go with, let's see if I can find it in here. Should be here, right here. Slash damage, leeching, then keen awareness, extra critical chance. So that would also be a very good ring to go with, but we go with this one just so we get that little extra stamina. When I am straight up DPSing, not doing a tank, I do run this one here. But anyways, our earring, the 2 things we need to have, Refreshing Toast and Despised. Get our potion cooldowns faster and making sure we are able to hold threat more easily with this Despised. And of course, we got to have either strength or dex here. So meeting all of that criteria. And on our weapons. So I've been playing with 2 different weapons. I have this weapon that I used to use, and I still use it some now. But in Season 2, I'm not using Leaping Strike anymore, so this one's not quite as good. Personally, Leaping Strike is not that great on a tank, because typically when we're using Leaping Strike, we're not continuing to finish, DPSing that mob that we hit with Leaping Strike, and oftentimes we're just using it for movement. We're not even hitting a mob with our Leaping Strike. So this isn't a crazy good perk, even if you are using Leaping Strike, but we're not even using it at all. So for us, in this run, it is a dead perk. But we do have Ancient Bane, which is important for us, and we have Enchanted. Both perks that are going to help us do extra damage. So very, very legit, very viable. But the other sword I've been playing with is this one here, Bane plus Refreshing Move. And preferably you have a third perk that does damage. Shirking Arcane, that's going to give us an extra 40% damage every time we dodge an attack on our next attack. So, I would prefer something that gives us consistent extra damage. If we could have Bane, Refreshing Move plus Enchanted or Attunement or something like that, that would be really unreal. But this one is pretty good, so I should get more damage probably out of this sword, but this one's going to bring my cooldowns back faster, so it's a little bit toss up, more damage versus extra utility with getting cooldowns on our skills a little bit faster. So that's our gear, and yeah, we're going 150 Constitution for the majority of the run. And I'd love to go lower, but when you're running with a random group, you don't want to get too carried away. So one thing I have a full second set and 4-piece of the Sunlord set and just one other random piece. So physical aversion's not really going to help us in the part that we're switching it out. Not a bad perk to have if we're a light tank. The archers are going to hurt us a little bit more than when we are a heavy tank. So not a terrible perk to have, but we're only using this on the boss, so this doesn't even really come into play for us. But the main thing check out here, thrust damage absorption. I put in a gem to absorb thrust damage. Scylla does thrust damage, so we go ahead and throw a bunch of these cut pristine emeralds into our full gear. So I have a full gear change, and then including our jewelry. So I have a thrust protection amulet with health, and note here, I do have Constitution on this, and I do have Constitution on this. What that allows me to do is, just like that, I go from 150 con to 200 con just by switching out my gear. Everything else here is dex or strength, including our ring. So the ring that we have, this is actually a pretty darn good one. So we don't have leeching, but we have enfeebling in place of it, which is very good because when we apply weaken to the boss, that weaken is going to last longer. So that means when we hit the boss with our shield rush, that weaken's going to last longer. We're hitting the boss with our refreshing move, and we're getting that cooldown back. So that means less downtime on the weaken in between our cooldowns. So that actually is pretty darn handy. So not a bad ring, the Forgotten Vow. So just by switching our gear just like that, our Constitution goes up to 200. So pretty handy to have that. Just nice easy gear change, and just like that we have that 200 plus Constitution, which gives us a plus 10% increase to physical and elemental armor. But it's also going to give us that extra HP pool as well. So very handy to have, and it's going to give us a lot of extra survivability. So the heart rune that we're going to be using, leeching, or the grasping vines, cunning heart rune of grasping vines. So what it's going to do is it's going to add enfeebling. It's going to weaken the mobs by 20% for 8 seconds. It's also going to lock them in place, going to root them, and it's going to do some leeching, give us a little extra healing power. So nothing wrong with that. Very handy. So we do have a third gear change, and we're just going to put this one on when we get to the cages. The reason for that is we are doing the cages in the typical 0-1-4 fashion. So the tank hangs out in the middle and survives, well, the rest of your team cleans up the mobs in the top, and then once they finish cleaning up, they come join you. So potentially you could leave the light stuff on, but just as a cautionary safety measure, we do throw our heavy on just for that part, because if we get killed, and well, it's not a good thing. It's not worthwhile. So we do just make a quick swap for heavy just for the cages, but then we go ahead and we swap back after the cages. So, and this is the full Chartist set. This isn't a crazy good set, but it does the job just fine. Refreshing Ward, not a crazy good perk. You don't want to sit there and face tank stuff more than you need to, and that's when this stuff really comes in handy, is when you're face tanking stuff. But not a crazy good piece of equipment, but it's good enough. It has the ward, and then Invigorated doesn't really come into play in Mutation. So it's basically a 1.5 perker, we'll call it. And it does have all strength, so that's good. And we do throw this heavy shield on. We could just leave our light shield on, but we have Bane and we have Ward. So extra damage and extra damage mitigation. Nothing wrong with that. So those are the 3 different gear sets we're working with. So it's really important that you understand the mechanics that bosses, sometimes you need to have different gear for the bosses when you are trying to be optimized. So let's move on. Let's talk about our weapons, our weapon perks, or rather our builds. So if you watch my other tanking guide, I'm actually running the exact same build on my sword and shield. We won't go crazy in depth here, but we are making sure we absolutely want to have leadership. So Season 2, I am taking Whirling Blade. It used to be Leaping Strike, but all of these perks, they're set in stone. Everything except these 2 and then Whirling Blade all the way down to the bottom, and that's because Whirling Blade inflects rend. It does do an acceptable amount of damage, 2 hits of 80%, so effectively 160% damage. And then we come down to the bottom, and the cooldown is reduced by 5% for each enemy we hit. So we are going to get this off of cooldown reasonably fast. You know, we hit a bunch of mobs, and just like that, it's a 10-second cooldown instead of 14. Then we hit them with our refreshing move, if we have our refreshing move sword on, and just like that, we have it back up. It's a very nice skill to have. It kind of goes off really quick now with the new changes, so I find it to be an effective skill to use. So, not going to go crazy in depth with this, but this is what we're taking on the left side. Now on the right side, there's a couple different possibilities you could potentially do, but this is what I'm running on the right side. Grants an additional 15 physical armor, kind of a no-brainer, you're taking it. Reduces damage from all magical types by 10%, no brainer, we're taking this mutation. They have lots of elemental damage, so no brainer, we're taking it. We're taking Shield Rush for sure, and that's because on a successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters get a 20% weaken. Very important. So, the other one here, when you block an attack, gain 20% Fortify for 5 seconds. So every time we block an attack, which is going to be fairly often, we're gaining some extra Fortify. So, very, very strong perk to have. And of course, this is our main taunt here, and it's also going to reduce incoming damage by 30%, so very strong. Then the other two we're taking, you could definitely switch these ones up. If you're having stamina issues, you could get rid of these two, and you could go ahead and take stamina damage is reduced by 15% when blocking a melee attack with a shield. Especially since you're a light, then this really could be important for you if you need it. And then right here, gain 15 stamina when hitting a target with Shield Bash or Shield Rush. We're not taking Shield Bash, although I would absolutely love to take Shield Bash. And there is a way we could do it, but I just find this Whirling Blade to be too nice. So what we could do here, we could potentially get rid of, you know, say this perk here, and we could put it here. Because, well, let's see, we couldn't quite do that. We have to keep enough here. So what we could do is we could get rid of this and put it here, so we're still getting use out of something. And then we could get rid of, say, this one, and we could take Shield Bash. Shield Bash is nice because it gives you an extra stun. So you could run Shield Bash, Shield Rush, and Defender's Resolve. This is actually a very nice stun, and it can come in very handy when you're light tanking because, well, when the enemies are stunned, they cannot hurt you or your teammates, so can be very strong, but we wouldn't want to lose leadership. So basically what we would do is perhaps we'd get rid of these two, we'd put these points here, we'd still leave this selected because we don't have a choice. We have to take one extra perk here, even if we don't use it. So then we would have 4 abilities selected, and then we just wouldn't use this one. We would use these others, but we would still get the leadership perk. So that's one way you could add Shield Bash if you wanted, just for a little extra survivability, a little extra CC. But, you know, the whole reason we're running this is to try and do some extra damage, try and help our team do extra damage. So we're going to go with Whirling Blade, and we're sticking to it. So that's a sword and shield tree, and our hammer. So this one changes up a little bit from my last build. So although I would still potentially like to run the other option, well, we need knockdowns more importantly. So we're taking 3 knockdowns. One ability that is crazy good in Season 2, Armor Breaker. They switched it up. It does tons of damage, and it inflicts 30% rend, which is massive. So when I'm heavy tanking, or else when I'm being a DPS with hammer on my back bar, I am going to be taking this fairly often. But Since we're a light tank, we need to make sure we're able to stun the enemies as much as we can. So we are taking 3 knockdowns. Well, 2 knockdowns plus 1 stun. Shockwave is obviously our taunt. It adds weaken. And, well, since we're running this hammer here, we also get to inflict Sundering Shockwave. Shockwave inflicts rend, reducing target's armor by 14% for 10 seconds. That's going to allow our team to do extra damage. So we are bringing some decent utility with our knockdowns, and we're also adding rend and weaken with our hammer. But we are going to be having a second DPS running hammer, and he is going to take armor breaker. But we need to have the extra knockdowns, so we are taking just 3 knockdowns that can allow us to continuously keep knocking down all the mobs when needed. So clear out, really nice. It just knocks the enemies down. It's going to grant us and our teammates a nice chunk of fortify, so that's always handy. But we're not going to go crazy into depth with this build. This is very nice. Heal for 35% of damage dealt when using a Crowd Crusher abilities. So that's these 2 abilities. We're going to get a chunk of healing. 35% of the damage we do, we're going to get back as healing. So very nice. We hit a bunch of mobs and we can top off our health just like that. So I do like haste, but I do skip out on this one for this build. So it would be viable to take it, but left side, increase armor penetration by 10% for all Warhammer basic attacks. So nice, not like an absolute must-have, but since we are taking this perk, we do need to select at least one of these 2. And, well, this is the better of the 2 because we're not going to be using heavy attacks. This one here adds grit to Warhammer heavy attacks, which we're not really going to be using, but also grants 12% damage reduction while grit is active. So we're going to have grit active on all 3 of these abilities. So we get ourselves in trouble, well, we pop one of these abilities and we're going to get some 12% reduction in incoming damage. And, well, yeah, these have grit, so we're not going to get knocked around while we're using them. We're also going to get damage mitigation because of this perk here. So kind of a pretty good synergy here. This one for a little extra damage, this one to get the little bit of damage reduction while we're using these 3 skills. So this skill, Wrecking Ball, it just knocks down the enemies. It doesn't have like a real wide radius, just a 1.5 meter radius, but Shockwave ends up having a 4 meter radius. And Clear Out, well, we just take a big swing and it kind of can knock things all around us down. So very, very handy. But yeah, that is our Warhammer build. And yeah, I guess that kind of covers everything we need to talk about for now. The only other thing is when we get to the very last boss, Chartis, what we are going to do, we're going to quickly search Amulet. We're going to throw on our Amulet that has, select it, Strike Protection plus Health. And then it needs to have either Strength or Dexterity, and that is because, well, we're going to throw it on, then we're going to go to our attributes, and we're going to respec, and we're going to get rid of all of our Constitution, and we are going to go 300 Strength, we're going to go 200 Dex, and then we're going to call it good. And, well, we're going to try and stay on our Sword and Shield as much as we can. And that is so our teammates all get the 10% bonus damage. But plus, since we're down to 5 con, we're going to do an acceptable amount of damage. And we're going to try and be hitting with that Rending Whirling Blade as much as we can. So we get down to 5 con. And we're going to make sure if we need to, we pop these infused ward potions. But just by having this Strike Protection Amulet and just by adding an amount of weaken to Chartis, we do tend to survive the hits. Some of his heavy hits that we get hit with, by Chartist. They do get us very low on health, but typically it's not enough to actually take us out. Just that strike protection along with adding weaken to him tends to be enough to make us survive. So that kind of covers all of the builds that we're going to be using throughout this run. So let's go ahead and jump into the run. So we're basically just finishing up our communications before we take off on the run. Obviously, one very important thing, anywhere that there might be questions about the run, just make sure you get that situated before you take off. Obviously, it's incredibly helpful if you can have voice comms. One thing I have done, instead of taking push to talk, I have been taking toggle to talk. So I can just press my V and then I can talk without having to hold down V. That can be pretty annoying when you're in the middle of a fight. So this very first pull, we just dodge right through everything. We stack on the archer, go ahead and stun the archer, and then we get a full taunt on everything. Typically, I'm going to pop a ward pop before we do this pull, which I should have done. You can see I ended up getting some pretty low health there. And I wouldn't have been pushing it so close if I had popped my ward pot. But I guess I missed that pop, but nonetheless, we did survive just barely. We did get low on health there while the Sacred was down for a second. But nonetheless, we are moving right along to the first pull. So this very first pull, we're going to get right up in there. We're going to hit him with our shockwave, stun everything. Well, not the two guys that end up blocking our stun, but whatever, you know, we get the taunt off, and yeah, we get their aggro. We hit them right away with our stun, then we hit them with another knockdown, and we save one of our knockdowns for a little bit later. We try to space them out just a little bit when we can. So once again, you can see we use one stun, we use one knockdown, and then we save one for a little bit. So that gives us a little bit of viability. If we do use up all three of our stuns and then we get into some troubles and we don't have one available, you know, not necessarily the perfect situation. So it can be helpful to space out your stuns. So mainly what I'm trying to do here is I'm just, every time a new group spawns in, I'm trying to drop a taunt, whether it's my shockwave or whether it is my big accelerated resolve, my big AoE taunt on my sword and shield. Once in a while, I'm not going to have a taunt available, so I try to make sure I can at least hit the mobs with something. So when I'm heavy tank, oftentimes I'll just back right into the portal, you know, and trap myself in there, hold aggro that way. But as a light tank, it can get pretty sketchy just stuffing yourself in a corner where you can get trapped. So I usually try to hang out on the edge and just keep holding aggro, make myself as predictable as possible. Obviously, every once in a while, I'll end up having to juke around, and unfortunately, that does cause the mobs to swing around, and gotta be careful with that. Swing around too much and you get your DPS killed. You can afford to lose troops here because you get so many in the cage. But yeah, one thing here I'm just kind of mentioning to our healer, go ahead and close this portal as soon as you can, because in the cages, well, we get tons of extra mob kills. So when this portal closes early, you do lose some mob kills, but it doesn't matter because we get all kinds of extra ones once we get into the cages. So moving right along to the next pull. And this pull is actually one that we can skip pretty easily. We don't have to waste time here, but they are squishy enough. We got some really strong DPS, so this pile does melt really quick. Obviously, it'd be even faster to go ahead and skip them, but really it ended up being just a super chill run. We could have saved so much time in so many different places. We could have pushed it a lot harder than we did. But it was just a super fun, chill run, and we still managed to get a really good time on it. Even though it was just about as chill of a run as you can get. So, one nice important thing here, our healer knew how to pull the archer. So one really nice thing is if you have a healer or a range, you know, say you got a rapier ice gauntlet user, if they know how to pull an archer, one thing you can do, they can shoot the archer and then they back away and the archer will come chase after you and pull him right into the group. 50%. So we got this little crawler, we can afford to skip him. But the only worry about that is if I don't aggro him and then he aggroes on somebody else, he might go take him out. So we go ahead, we grab his aggro. Hopefully he's going to keep coming for us. Well, then we get inside and we go ahead and taunt. The one thing I'm worried about is that javelin guy, because he'll sit back and chuck javelins at people. So I do try to get close to the open door before I drop my big AoE taunt. That way I do gain his aggro even though he is kind of far away from all of us. So annoying when he sits back and throws javelins instead of coming join in on a nice AoE party, but it is what it is. Once again, we're just running right past everything. We're line of sight, and if you are trying to keep things moving, you don't want to stop and hit every single mob. There's a couple spots in this dungeon where I end up kind of doing that in this run, where you end up losing some time. But that's the example of how you should do it. Just dodge right past the mobs, and your DPS, they have the responsibility of either knowing how to dodge the mobs if they do grab the aggro and pull them to you, or just wait behind so they don't steal the line of sight aggro, and wait till the group gathers up and then they can come in. So once again, our healer, you know, really good healer, knows the run very well. He goes and pulls the archer and the melee guy from on top of the steps, and you can see that archer pulled right into the group very nicely. So anytime you got someone that knows how to pull aggro on an archer and drag it into the group, make it chase them, super helpful. It's going to make your runs go so much smoother. It's going to save time, all that. So we go ahead, we pop our ward pop, we jump right in here, we go ahead and drop our shockwave on everything, and then once that original taunt wears off, we're going to go ahead and use our sword and shield taunt, a nice big AoE taunt. One thing you can see, there is one mob that gets stuck chasing our healer, so it's tempting for me to go and try to chase him down, but our healer is doing a good job of skirting him. So we are going to just focus on the boss, make sure that we get all the aggro on the boss, and keep the aggro of the little mobs that keep spawning in. Ideally, we don't let that mob keep chasing after our healer, but the problem is if us or a DPS get outside of that heal, well, somebody can start getting knocked, and that's not ideal. So another thing here, that archer back off in the distance, same thing, the healer can shoot him and then back away and drag him to us. So this pull, most people, they do take it to the back corner, but if you are trying to save some time, you do want to do this pull right in the doorway. You don't want to waste time running all the way to the back. So I wish more groups would do it this way. It's actually not a bad pull at all, even for just a regular pub group. If I'm running heavy armor, it's not a terrible pull at all. It's not that hard of a pull. Sometimes it's easier than pulling everything to the back in certain ways. So, but one little secret, there's that one archer on the steps. The healer can shoot him and then back up to the far side of the hallway, and it's going to pull that archer right into the stack very nicely. So little tricks like that make all the difference in the world. Nice. So just kind of one of those little things that, you know, just having the right group that has the right know-how can make all the difference in the world. That little back dodge, oh, that's crazy. I don't know why it's still in the game. You're moving forward, you hit dodge, and you randomly dodge backwards. So annoying. But it is what it is. So we are moving into Scylla. And what I do here, I go ahead and equip my Scylla tanking set. And what I have is a full thrust set. Thrust gems in all of my armor and jewelry. I have a thrust amulet as well. So we're good to go. Scylla does actually do some slash damage as well. So you could, if you wanted, slot a couple of slash gems, or you could slash a couple of just physical gems in general. But they don't do quite as much mitigation as a straight up thrust. So she does more thrust attacks. So I think, you know, it'd be probably better to stack more thrust ward than slash, but she does definitely do some. Right there we got a couple of heavy slashes in, so there's another big slash. One little secret, if you don't know what you need to be building your build for at certain bosses, record your run and then slow it down and see those little red numbers. If it's an arrow, it means you're taking thrust damage. If it's that little C looking slash, you see, look at my attacks. There's that little C slash looking thing. So that means it's a slash damage. So if you are taking damage, it shows red, and it's that little C looking thing, it's slash damage that you're taking. If it's an arrow, well, you're taking thrust damage. So one nice little bonus is go ahead, record your runs, and, well, see what type of damage mitigation you need to take on your next run. So, right here, we're just trying to take Scylla to 15 stacks. We get her up to roughly 20 stacks, maybe, but basically what we do, you know, right at the start of the fight, we hit her with our big AoE taunt. Before she's even active, we hit her with our Sword and Shield AoE taunt. That way we have our taunt before she even becomes active. We're going to hit her with our shield rush right away, add weaken, and then we're basically going to cycle through our weakens. Typically, we're going to try to save our ward pots until she gets around 10 in power. Then we're going to try to pop our ward pot, and we're going to try to make sure we have at least one weaken that we can add to her. So, kind of important to keep track of that timing. Hopefully, you don't get into a desperate situation forcing you to pop a ward pot early, but right off the bat, you're going to go ahead and you're going to do your big AoE taunt, and you're going to go ahead and hit her with your shield rush. So she got some weaken right away, you got her taunted right away, you're going to go ahead and add your rends kind of right away, at least your sword and shield ren. But the other one, your hammer, you can wait a little bit until your first taunt wears off, and then you can go and stack your shockwave, which is going to add ren, it's going to add weaken. So what we're doing here, we actually swapped to our heavy gear just for the cages. And it ended up being pretty fortunate that I did. Well, it's not worth it to go down on the cages just because you want to run short, run light. It's worth it if you're just trying to do it strictly for fun, which more or less I am for fun, so just for the challenge. But ended up getting 3 archers that spawn in here and 1 reaver. About the worst combination you can get. So if I had my light gear still on, 3 archers shooting at me non-stop, well, I could have gotten taken out in a darned quick hurry. So hopefully your healer gonna go ahead and drop the sacred on you here, because if they can't survive up top with 3 DPS and a healer that's got, you know, their autos for healing and their other secondary heals, well, something's not right. So yeah, anyways, healers should be dropping a heal on you inside the cages here, and they should have no problem surviving with the healer's secondary heals up top. This part here, basically any archer that spawns in on this left portal, you do want your teammate to, you know, pay attention to them, but more or less you're going to stack on this other portal, because you're just going to get, as you keep killing off the mobs, they're just going to spawn in like crazy, and you're just going to rack up the kills. So if your team can survive the archer in the back shooting at you, you know, it's okay, but you can see right there, it didn't work. One of our DPS did get locked onto by that archer on the backside, and, well, those archers do hurt, so gotta be careful of those archers if they do spawn in on the backside. If it is a melee guy, they'll end up joining in on the fight eventually, or else if they stay dormant on the far side, that's fine too. But main thing you gotta be careful of, if it is an archer that spawns on the back portal, careful of them. One of your DPS can go and take him out.
Yeah, I'm going to it.
It's a good thing to do. Otherwise, he can pick your team off one by one, and all of a sudden you get 2 knocks, and, well, then it gets pretty hard because you get a lot of mobs that spawn in on these portals at once. And if you get down to 2 to 3 guys, well, you just might end up with a team wipe. Not good, because you're not going to get the mob kills you need, and if you do get any full deaths, well, you're going to lose a big chunk of points on your run. So if you try to get those leaderboard type runs, you don't want to get any kind of knocks, Unless you're just doing a speed run, then the knocks don't matter as long as you can still get gold. Getting a full death doesn't matter if you're just going for a speed run. But if you're going for a points leaderboard position, you really do not. You can't afford to get any full deaths. Just the way it is. So typically on this part, actually, I won't run up the steps. I'll run to the ledge and I'll just jump up the ledge. I'll crawl up the ledge. So either way works, but it's nice to just jump up the ledge, go ahead and taunt everything, grab its aggro. So either way works, but I like to just climb up the ledge. I don't like to stop and hit troops. Kind of got to rely on your team that they can dodge anything that they get aggro on. So really important that you have a strong team that is able to fend for itself when need be. If you're trying to do a speed run type of thing, if you're trying to get leaderboard types of runs, you cannot afford to sit there and taunt every single mob. You cannot afford to just go and do damage to every single mob just so you don't have a DPS crying that, oh, you're not getting aggro of everything. Sure, you try to line of sight things, but your DPS, they need to be able to take care of themselves as well. Just the way it is.
I got haste on my pickaxe, so should be good.
So when it comes to light tanking, comes to trying to get leaderboard type runs, it comes down to having a full team. You cannot do everything on your own as a tank. You get the wrong group while you're trying to light tank, and you'll have the most miserable time of your life, and you'll never want to do a light tank run again. So some groups are okay with it. Some groups are perfectly fine with just having fun. Don't care if you get a bunch of knocks, if things get a little bit haywire. So, you're going to find people that actually love the fun of it. But other groups, you're going to get that, things go a little bit sideways and they just start complaining the whole run, and just makes life kind of miserable. But so kind of got to set expectations before you do the run. Like I said, when I make my group finder, I let people know right off the bat. And sometimes even when I do that, you still get people that, I've made these kind of runs before. Like in Genesis, I'll let people know, hey, I'm a light tank, and you better be serious if you're going to apply to join this group, or else don't join. And then you get started on the run, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing this light tank thing? Why don't you just put on a heavy tank? We're dying all the time. It's like, well, you signed up for it, and apparently you didn't have the know-how to run with a light tank. But it's just the way it goes. Doesn't matter how many times you ask people that, hey, this is the plan for the run. You don't have to join. It's on you. You want to join, that's your call. But you certainly don't have to. But sometimes, no matter how many times you let people know what the expectations of the run are, they just ignore everything. They say, yeah, sure, everything's good, and then you get into the run and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. But that's just the way it goes, part of the life of the pug life. But at the end of the day, I really do enjoy doing the pug runs, because you meet a lot of people that, a lot of fun to do runs with. And of course, you do run into the toxic side of things as well, but it's just what it is. You get some give and take. But yeah, this part of it is just super basic. It shouldn't be anything difficult about it as a light tank. You can do this part with 4 DPS, which is basically what you are when you're a light tank. But
we actually could have improved.
So we're coming up on the last part before we get to Chartis. This little last boss, he's as basic as it comes as well. Just run in, apply your ends, and basically just go to town doing as much DPS as you can. DPS, use your ends, call it a day.
Yeah, we ran a few before.
I've seen people get knocked on him, but typically you're not going to get knocked by this boss unless you're just like kind of sleeping on the job, I guess we'll say, to put it lightly. But it does happen. Sometimes you just get a little bit careless, and that's when you get knocked.
I know I've ran with you some.
Anyways, we're coming up on to Chartis, the last part of the run, and we are going to go ahead and we're going to put our strike damage protection amulet on. So we just search amulet. We find the one that we know it looks like. Okay, there's 2 of them that look the same. We find the one with strike protection. Put it on. Gonna drop all of our con. Gonna go to 300 strength, 200 dex.
I can grab the
Even
thing.
250 strength, 250 dex would probably be good, but
Yep.
yeah, me, I'm the one. I'm gonna probably be doing a little bit less damage than the rest of our DPS because they're a little bit more optimized. But I'm gonna go ahead and grab this orb, and I still have my sword and shield out, so I'm still giving them the extra 10% damage buff. But I'm gonna go ahead and get the orb while everybody else is focusing on DPSing the boss. So then of course I'm just gonna go ahead and join them. We're basically just trying to stick on our sword and shield, keep that buff up as long as we can. We're gonna go ahead and use our whirling blade to apply the rend, and we're just gonna keep on attacking him. So one option is I could go with the refreshing move to get that whirling blade back more often, but I do have the enchanted sword and shield on, so I'm doing a little bit of extra damage because we're just light attacking, heavy attacking. And basically what I'm doing is I'll do one heavy attack because that gives me empower. Then I'll go through 2 sets of light attacks, and then anytime my whirling blade comes up, I'm going to use that and apply some rend. But you can see just how strong our group did. 5 con tank with leadership, and 3 DPS with anywhere from 5 to 50 con, and well,
60K, holy.
we
The
almost
highest I think I hit
were
was
able
50
to
on him.
wipe him out while he was still laying down. Not quite, just barely fell
My
short,
highest was
but
49, I think.
one of our DPS, he said he hit a
hit one that was
60k
50,
crit with his great sword. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never been able to get that with my great sword. So I'd love to know how he was able to get that versus
Yeah,
me.
I
But
ain't complaining.
I know obviously it has to
He's
do with
pretty
being
good run.
completely stacked out on rend, completely stacked out on empower.
Yeah, I tried a couple
And one thing that I know does
couple,
help
like,
is the
tanks
fact that I
earlier
am
felt like,
running
just
leadership and
trying
I'm
to find
also
a
running the
few
rending
decently
ability
optimized
on my
pieces, but
sword.
not really kind
So a
of
lot of
fully
tanks out there
optimized
that
it.
still
It's just
aren't running leadership, a
so
lot of
bad.
tanks out there that aren't going to
You
be
just get
running
beat up so bad
that
when
whirling
you get a
blade for
group
that
like this,
extra
and
rend. But
how do you
Lazarus,
ever run it not
it's a
like
really good
No,
dungeon
it's
to
completely
start
different story
practicing to
when you
push
have a good
yourself.
group
So it's a
versus-
really good run if you want to go heavy and drop down to
Yeah,
100 con. You still should have incredible survivability in Lazarus at 100 con
Oh,
with
yeah, no, for
leadership.
sure.
So definitely highly recommend you start using Lazarus as a run to push yourself on. So that's gonna cover it. You can see we got a nice almost 82k run, super chill run. We could have improved it so many ways, so many different parts. We didn't do skips that we could have and should have done, but nonetheless, we still finished it in just over 20 minutes, I think it was. And perfect run, no full deaths.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yeah,
sitting
there you
now,
go.
almost
Hope you
maxed
liked
out
it,
right
and
now. I want
let
to
me
buy
know
a component, but I'm
what you
missing
thought about it,
almost out of
and let me
gold.
know if you're gonna give it a try. We'll catch you on the next one.